Some legal issues ongoing today, one of which we'll cover later in the show, revolving around the lawsuit being filed by the New York Attorney General against the city school district in Utica on behalf of refugees. A couple of other lawsuits of interest we'll cover right now with Jimmy Vielkind, who is based in Albany, one of your good buddies. Jay?
Yeah, we've worked with Jimmy over the years. We have a sister station out in Amsterdam, and WVTL, and Jimmy used to come on and talk with us and talk with Bob Cudmore about the happenings in the state capitol. I think, I talked about this before. I think Jimmy is one of the best down there, if not the best, on keeping track on what goes on. So.
Jimmy, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction.
Come on, you know it's true. Stop.
Hey, before we get into politics, we've been talking about the best restrooms, the best public restrooms. There was apparently a public outhouse in Colorado that got the award from Cintas for the best public restroom. We were talking about best public restrooms here in our area in the Mohawk Valley. Do you have one in particular you like to use in the Capitol District?
In the Capitol building itself, there's one that's like really they redid it a few years ago, and it's I think they paid a couple $100,000 to do it. And if you're using the last stall, you can open the window and you can climb out onto a balcony overlooking the Hudson River on the edge of the state capitol.
See, I told you, Jimmy knows everything.
Something only an insider would know.
And
you're not supposed to be there, but it's a pretty good perch.
And that's Shelley Silver's personal bathroom, right? That's how that worked out?
Oh, no. That's for the hoi polloi.
Yeah. I wonder if they have similar escape routes from the courthouses that those guys are in right now, facing trials, of course. So which one do you want to talk about first, guys? Shelley Silver's or Dean Skelos? Jay, go ahead.
I don't know. Let's talk about the Skelos trial. I see his son Adam here probably needed his mouth washed out by mom at some point. Just tell us about what you're seeing and how the trail you're following goes.
Well, sure, and I'll try and do so and keep you guys out of the crosshairs of the FCC. But as some listeners might know, the Dean Skelos, the former Senate Majority Leader, he was the top elected Republican in the state of New York, went on trial and started with opening statements yesterday, along with his son Adam. And now the basic scheme in which the Skeloses are accused of is that Adam Skelos doesn't seem to be the biggest self-starter in this world. He's kind of like a Billy Madison type figure.
Mm-hmm. Tommy boy.
I think definitely Billy Madison. And so, his father, Dean Skelos, is accused of helping him, setting him up with, no-show jobs. And the people that he helped him, or that he set him up with, all had business before the state. One was a large real estate developer called Glenwood Management, which had Adam hired by one of its subsidiaries, an environmental company. Another was Physicians Reciprocal Insurance, which is a big insurance company that is actually having and has had for a long time some real business problems, and that has escaped state takeover or state strict scrutiny. And the thought is that the correlation between these favors that these companies did for the Senate Majority Leader's son and the fact that they, rely on state business is, that's unlawful, that represents a quid pro quo. And, of course, the defense side is trying to allege that both Adam and Dean Skelos are innocent and that this is just the father who's helping out his son. But as you guys pointed out, the thing about this trial that makes it so rich is there are hours and hours of wiretaps that we think really demonstrate the state of mind of certainly Adam Skelos and then his father, Dean Skelos. So yesterday in open court, the jurors heard a recording of Adam Skelos calling his father after the decision last year to ban natural gas hydrofracking in the state. Adam does sound like Billy Madison. He's whining. He calls the governor, something that you might call a cat. Starts with a P and ends with a Y.
Okay. Pretty. He called the governor pretty.
Yeah, that's it. He called him a putty cat is what I think
gotcha.
Pretty called him, right? Something like that. And then Dean Skelos says he's going to run against Cuomo. So it's this trial, I think, is going to be salacious and sort of jaw-dropping because of the presence of those audio recordings. And I know that there are some news outlets that have posted them online. I encourage listeners to just take a listen for themselves. And, the Skelos trial is really just getting underway, but already it seems as though there's going to be a lot of damning evidence that comes to the fore.
Yeah, I want to hear that clip myself now of him calling the governor pretty or putty cat or whatever it was there. So hopefully we can dig that up and get that on our airwaves. That sounds great. We're talking with Jimmy Vielkind, Albany Bureau Chief at Politico, here on the Talk of the Town at 100.7 FM WUTQ.
Another piece of interesting information, Jimmy, is the fact that the folks that have employed Adam Skelos at the time, his boss, I guess, if you will, kept kind of a ledger on how he was moving and the days that he took off and things of that nature.
Yeah, and so Adam Skelos was secured this job, and maybe you and I and maybe some of your listeners have this experience where you get your first job. And it is because someone helps you, right? It is because someone, be it like a schoolmate or an old buddy from down the block, or a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, say like, hey, you take a look at my kid, take a look at this guy or this gal, and my thought has always been, okay, you do that, everyone does that, and it gets your foot in the door. And once your foot's in the door, it's up to you to prove that you're worth your medal. Adam Skelos didn't really get that memo. So he had this job, and he didn't show up. He didn't call in. His attendance was spotty. And his supervisor, after 1 week of work, began keeping a journal of how little he had shown up. Almost like he might have labeled it in case of subpoena, to sort of just show, and it's now admitted into evidence in court, that this was essentially a no-show job, and that the timesheets that Adam Skelos was filing were not necessarily consistent with his attendance.
It sounds like this quote-unquote job reminds me of some of the quote-unquote jobs that boosters set up for so-called student athletes in colleges these days.
Sounds like a Sopranos episode to me.
Yeah, well, so.
And I guess moving on to another elected official here in our state, Mr. Silver.
And family involved with that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the case revolves far less along Sheldon Silver's family, but the essential rap on him, and he, for people who don't know, is the top Democrat in the legislature, and had been for over 20 years when prosecutors unsealed their indictment against him earlier this year. So Silver's trial is wrapping up now in Lower Manhattan, and he's essentially accused of the same thing, trading official favors for some sort of kickbacks. And Silver's accused of basically taking referrals from a doctor. There's especially in New York City, I guess other places too, but if you are a person who's been exposed to asbestos and you develop a disease, a lung cancer or some other type of disease, you have a legal case. You're probably going to win. And it's a very lucrative legal case in that the person who exposed you to asbestos, and that could be an employer, that could be a school district, whomever, is going to be liable for a lot of money to you. And so there are trial lawyers, including members of the firm of Whites and Luxembourg, where Silver worked, for whom these patients are incredibly valuable because they know any valid patient with a valid claim is going to get them a big settlement, and they get to take a third of that settlement. So Silver was allegedly trading referrals, patients who had lung cancer, for funding for cancer research with a doctor who worked at Columbia University in New York City and was a kind of a buddy of Silver's from the old neighborhood. Silver is also accused of working and referring real estate companies to a tax firm that would do appeals on their tax assessments. And these real estate companies were some of the same ones that had major business before the state that needed Silver's help on rent control and rent regulations and certain real estate development subsidies. And so, again, it's this conflict between outside income and your official job, and Silver claiming that he was within the law and that outside income is permissible, and prosecutors saying that this is nothing more than a bribe. So that trial's starting to wrap up. We expect we're going to have jurors start to deliberate next week. And the stakes on these trials are both pretty high, both for Silver and Skelos, but really for Albany and how business is done, and also for Preet Bharara, the federal prosecutor from Manhattan, who brought these cases and whose reputation is certainly riding on the outcomes here.
Yeah, you wonder if also the reputation of New York State is being, compromised a little bit in the eyes of folks around the country as being a state that engages in dirty politics in general.
Yeah, really. And Jimmy, just about a month and a half, what do we have, about 50 days as, session starts back up in January. Where do you see, and maybe your thoughts on how, these chambers are going to react with the outcome of both of these gentlemen and the information coming out on both of these gentlemen?
I'm really pessimistic about anything really getting done. Both of these guys were indicted, and they were eventually removed from their purchase. Not immediately, but I should say eventually removed from the leadership. But members of the state assembly were in town last week, and I started to ask, well, guys, is there any larger meetings or anything that you're going to do as a result of Silver? That they, to a T, they just sort of shrugged. The new speaker, Carl Hastie, a Democrat from the Bronx, said that Silver's case was, quote, not relevant, end quote, to any reforms that they would make. So, no, I don't think lawmakers are planning any kind of changes. I think that at the Capitol, the rank and file see these instances as one-offs, even though I, as someone who's been covering Albany for 7 years now and, listening to a lot of the kind of structural problems with the system as it currently exists, see that there is probably a systemic change that should be considered, and there are certainly plenty of people out there who are advocating as much. So,
which is interesting. Which is interesting, and specifically with the Silver's trial, that his defense is saying, this is just politics as usual in New York State. Nothing to see here.
Well, that's true, and whether or not you try to use that as a defense for one man or as a scathing indictment of the entire system, I guess depends upon where you sit.
Great. Jimmy, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon.